Rome. How one city changed the world forever. Imagine a world without modern governments, modern laws, organized armies, or even many of the roads that connect cities today. Now imagine that the foundation for all of those things was laid by a civilization that collapsed more than 1,500 years ago. That civilization was Rome. For centuries, Rome dominated much of the known world. Its armies conquered vast territories. Its engineers built incredible structures. Its leaders created systems that still influence governments today. But Rome wasn't born as an empire. It started as a small settlement on the banks of a river in central Italy. And according to legend, Rome's story began with two abandoned brothers. The legend tells us that twins named Romulus and Remus were left to die as infants. Against all odds, they were discovered by a she-wolf who protected and raised them until they were found by a shepherd. As the brothers grew older, they decided to build a city of their own. But ambition can be dangerous. A conflict broke out between them. And according to the story, Romulus killed Remus and became the first ruler of a new city. He named it Rome. It's one of the most famous origin stories in history. But here's the thing. Most historians don't believe it actually happened. Archaeological evidence suggests that Rome developed gradually from several small villages that merged together. Near the Tiber River, there were no wolves raising children, no epic battle between brothers, just ordinary people building a community in a strategic location. And yet, that small community would eventually become one of the most powerful civilizations the world has ever seen. By the 6th century BC, Rome was growing rapidly. At first, it was ruled by kings, but many Romans became frustrated with royal power. They believed no single person should control everything. Eventually, the Roman people overthrew their last king and created something revolutionary, a republic. Instead of one ruler holding absolute authority, power would be shared among elected officials and government institutions. For the ancient world, this was a radical idea. Citizens could participate in politics. Leaders had limits on their power. Government decisions required debate and approval. Was it perfect? Not even close. The wealthy elite still controlled much of the system. Ordinary citizens often struggled for representation. But compared to many kingdoms of the time, Rome's political structure was remarkably advanced, and it gave Rome a major advantage. Because while other states depended on a single ruler, Rome created institutions that could survive long after individual leaders were gone. As the republic grew stronger, so did its ambitions. Rome began expanding across Italy. Neighboring tribes and rival cities were gradually defeated or absorbed. Every victory brought more land, more resources, and more soldiers. But expansion also created new enemies. One of the biggest threats came from the north. Warrior tribes known as the Gauls launched devastating attacks on Roman territory. At one point, they even captured and burned much of Rome itself. For many civilizations, that would have been the end. For Rome, it became motivation. The city was rebuilt. Its defenses were strengthened. Its armies became larger and more disciplined. The Romans learned an important lesson. lesson. Survival required strength, and strength required expansion. Over time, Rome transformed its military into one of the most effective fighting forces in history. Roman soldiers trained relentlessly. They marched incredible distances. They built roads, forts, and defensive walls wherever they went. Discipline became their greatest weapon. Unlike many armies of the ancient world, Roman legions operated like highly organized machines. Every soldier had a role. Every formation had a purpose. Every campaign followed a strategy. This efficiency allowed Rome to defeat enemies that often outnumbered them. And soon, Rome's influence spread far beyond Italy. The Republic was no longer a regional power. It was becoming a Mediterranean superpower. But an even greater challenge was waiting across the sea. A rival so powerful that it would push Rome to the brink of destruction. A civilization known as Carthage. And the struggle between Rome and Carthage would produce one of the greatest military commanders in human history. A man whose name terrified Romans for generations. His name was Hannibal. By the 3rd century BC, Rome had become the dominant power in Italy. But there was one problem. The Mediterranean already had another superpower, Carthage. Located in North Africa, near modern-day Tunisia, Carthage controlled major trade routes, powerful fleets, and enormous wealth. Both Rome and Carthage wanted control of the Mediterranean, and neither side was willing to back down. The result was a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars. Wars that would last more than a century. Wars that would change history forever. But among all the generals who fought during these conflicts, one name still stands above the rest. Hannibal, a military genius whose strategy continues to be studied by military academies. Around the world, Hannibal didn't simply attack Rome. He did something nobody thought was possible. He marched an army across the Alps. Think about that for a second. Thousands of soldiers, war elephants, all crossing some of Europe's most dangerous mountains. Many men died during the journey, but those who survived shocked the Romans. No enemy army had ever approached from that direction before. Rome wasn't prepared. What followed was a military nightmare. Again and again, Hannibal defeated Roman armies. Entire legions were wiped out. Roman commanders were humiliated. At the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC, Hannibal achieved one of the greatest tactical victories in military history. Tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed. For a moment, it looked like Rome might actually fall. But Rome refused to surrender. No matter how many defeats it suffered, the Republic kept fighting. New armies were raised. New strategies were developed. The Romans adapted, and eventually, they took the war directly to Carthage. Years later, Hannibal was finally defeated. The war ended, but Rome wanted to make sure Carthage would never threaten them again. During the Third Punic War, Roman forces completely destroyed the city. Buildings were burnt. The population was either killed or enslaved. One of the greatest powers of the ancient world disappeared. Rome now stood alone, master of the Western Mediterranean. But victory created a new problem. As Rome became richer, the gap between rich and poor grew larger. Powerful families gained more influence. Political corruption increased. Ambitious leaders began competing for control. The Republic was becoming unstable. And into that instability stepped a man whose name would become legendary. Julius Caesar. Caesar was intelligent, charismatic, and incredibly ambitious. When he was given command of Roman forces in Gaul, modern-day France, and surrounding regions, he saw an opportunity, not just to win wars, but to build a reputation that could make him the most powerful man in Rome. For years, Caesar led successful military campaigns across Gaul. His victories expanded Roman territory. His soldiers became fiercely loyal to him, and his popularity exploded. By the time he returned, he wasn't just a general. He was a national hero. That made many senators nervous. They feared Caesar was becoming too powerful. Eventually, they ordered him to give up his command. Instead, Caesar made a decision that would change Roman history forever. He crossed the Rubicon River with an army. In Roman law, that was an act of rebellion. Civil war began. Caesar's forces moved quickly. One by one, his rivals were defeated. Within a few years, he emerged as the most powerful man in the Republic. He introduced reforms, improved parts of the government, expanded opportunities for many citizens. But there was one problem. The Republic was built on the idea that no single person should have unlimited power. Caesar now had exactly that. Many Romans admired him. Others feared him. A group of senators became convinced that if they did nothing, the Republic would die. So they planned an assassination. On March 15th, 44 BC, a day remembered as the Ides of March, Caesar entered a meeting of the Senate. He never walked out. The conspirators attacked, stabbing him repeatedly. One of the most famous assassinations in history was complete. The senators believed they were saving Rome. Instead, they unleashed chaos. The Roman people were furious. Political violence exploded. Civil war returned. And from that chaos emerged a young man few people initially took seriously, a man named Octavian, the adopted heir of Julius Caesar. Within a generation, he would accomplish something no Roman had ever achieved. He would end the Republic forever and create an empire. After years of civil war, Octavian emerged as the undisputed ruler of Rome. But unlike Julius Caesar, he understood something important. Romans hated kings. If he openly declared himself a monarch, he risked suffering the same fate as Caesar. So, he played a different game. Instead of calling himself king, he accepted a new title, Augustus, meaning the revered one. Officially, Rome was still a republic. In reality, Augustus controlled everything. And surprisingly, it worked. For more than 4 decades, Augustus brought stability to a world exhausted by war. Roads were built, trade expanded, cities flourished, crime dropped. For the first time in generations, many Romans experienced peace. Historians call this era the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, and it would become one of the most successful periods in human history. Over the next 2 centuries, Rome reached heights no one could have imagined. At its peak, the empire stretched from Britain in the north to North Africa in the south, from Spain in the west to the Middle East in the east. Millions of people lived under Roman rule. Massive roads connected distant provinces. Aqueducts carried fresh water into cities. Engineers built structures that still stand today. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, ancient bridges, ancient roads. Many of them remain standing nearly 2,000 years later. Rome wasn't just powerful. It was organized, efficient, and incredibly advanced for its time. But history has a pattern. The bigger an empire becomes, the harder it is to control. And Rome was no exception. Some emperors ruled wisely. Others became symbols of corruption and excess. One of the most infamous was Nero. Stories about Nero have survived for centuries. Some are true, others are likely exaggerated. When a devastating fire swept through Rome, many citizens blamed the emperor. Whether that blame was justified or not, the damage to his reputation was done. Eventually, Nero lost support. Abandoned by allies and facing rebellion, he took his own life. His death plunged Rome into another period of chaos. Emperors rose and fell. Assassinations became common. Civil wars returned. For a while, it seemed the empire might tear itself apart. Yet somehow, Rome survived. Again and again, strong leaders restored order. New reforms stabilized the government. The empire continued moving forward. One of the most important turning points came during the reign of Constantine. Before a major battle, Constantine reportedly experienced a powerful religious vision. After securing victory, he embraced Christianity. What happened next changed world history. Christianity went from a persecuted religion to one supported by the empire. Over time, it spread across Roman territory and far beyond. The consequences are still visible today. But while religion was growing stronger, Rome itself was becoming weaker. Economic problems intensified. Taxes increased. Political corruption returned. Military costs became overwhelming. The empire had become too large, too complex, too expensive to manage. In an attempt to solve the problem, Roman leaders divided the empire into two parts: the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. The eastern half remained wealthy and stable. The western half struggled. Its borders came under constant attack. Germanic tribes pushed deeper into Roman territory. Cities became vulnerable. Resources became scarce, and confidence in the government continued to decline. Then came the final blow. In 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was removed from power. The Western Roman Empire was officially finished. A civilization that had dominated the world for centuries had fallen. Or had it? Because here's the fascinating thing. Rome never truly disappeared. Its influence survived. And in many ways, it still surrounds us today. The idea of a republic, Roman law, the concept of citizenship, many modern government institutions, all influenced by Rome. Even the calendar you use every day carries Roman fingerprints. Many English words come directly from Latin, the language of Rome. The roads we travel, the architecture we admire, the political debates we have, the legal systems we depend on, echoes of Rome are everywhere. The empire collapsed, but its ideas survived. And perhaps that's Rome's greatest achievement. Not the territories it conquered, not the armies it commanded, not the wealth it accumulated, but the fact that thousands of years later, its influence continues shaping the modern world. Rome conquered more than land. It conquered time itself. And that is why the story of Rome remains one of the most important stories ever told. Because when we study Rome's rise, we learn how civilizations become powerful. And when we study Rome's fall, we learn how even the strongest civilizations can disappear. The question is, will future generations learn the same lessons from us? Or will history repeat itself once again? Thanks for watching History Mysteries.